It is July 12th, 2010, a hot summer day in the North Country, but nice and cool in the boardroom of the CVPH Medical Center. And we're here to talk some history. I have three ladies with me who have a total of at least weeks and years of memories connected with the old Champlain Valley Hospital, and that's why we're here, to celebrate the 100th anniversary. And none of us were around back then, so don't age us any more than we need to be. But in 1910, there was a hospital here. And this hospital, or at least in this location, was not here until 1926. So there's a lot of history within these walls and those walls, a few of which still exist over there on Ruger Street as part of the college campus. Marcy Cavanaugh is familiar to our viewers if you watched a program that we did earlier in 2010. A little bit of history in that wonderful new chapel, right, Marcy?
Oh, it's beautiful.
I talked to Father Reamer after that because he did our Mass on Sunday morning, this past Sunday morning in July. And I told him how highly he was regarded here, and he loves that chapel as well.
Oh, he did a fantastic job. He planned most of it, and it turned out beautiful. And he's a very hard worker. And he really
is a very dedicated priest, a wonderful human being, and we share hometowns down in Pearl River, New York, so that's not a bad idea either. Also, we have with us Suzanne Paris. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
We're delighted. She says, I don't know what I can talk about. You know we'll find something to talk about. And Agatha McDonald, how are you, Ag?
I'm fine, thank you, and I'm nice and comfortable right now because of the air conditioning.
I didn't even know you were going to be here today, either one of you, so I'm so pleased to have all of you here. We do have something in common, and that is the Champlain Valley Hospital. And I need, just by way of preference, you saw a picture of it in the beginning of our show. There are only a few parts of it remaining, Marcy.
Well, they tore that remaining part down. The only building that's left is where the English department is on the campus. So
But you spent time in that building, didn't you? That was...
Oh, yes.
I mean, that building that's there now.
Absolutely, that was the nurses' home.
Oh, what? So there you all spent time there.
We spent 3 years there.
3
Did you
years
really?
with the nun, under the nun's supervision. 3 years.
There was
She
no question
smiles when
about
she
that.
says that, too.
Yes.
No, there was never any question about who was in charge, was there?
No, there wasn't.
No.
Were you all pretty young when that started? How about
Oh,
you,
yes.
Ag?
I was 18 when I went into training.
You haven't changed a bit.
I was 17.
Were you really?
Yes.
Ha, ha,
I was
ha.
just a baby.
How old were you, Mars, when you started there?
I was 18.
See that? Were you all originally from Plattsburgh?
I was.
Were you?
I'm from Chateauguay.
Oh, of course. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
My family
But I'll
lived
tell
here
you,
for a
it
good
was
number.
something different.
Has lived here a good number of years.
Oh,
All
that's
these years.
great.
from the farm to Plattsburgh and the nurses' home and the hospital because of, I was a shy little farm girl.
But why nursing? Why nursing for you, Ag?
Well, I had a choice. I could have had a college scholarship to St. New Rochelle for teaching through a couple of the teachers I'd had in high school. My mother always talked about nursing because she admired the nurses that she used to see to go to work when she lived in Johnson City. In fact, I was born in Johnson City, but
No
I
kidding.
was not there very long when they moved back north. And I think this influenced me, and I have two sisters, one who is now deceased, both of whom graduated from the Champlain Valley.
No kidding. A
The three of
family
us.
affair.
3 of us. 3 girls and 3 boys, and the 3 girls are all nurses.
Isn't that fantastic? And yes, your family has been here for a long time
Right.
in businesses other than nursing.
Right. We had Rosebud Creamery was my
Of course.
family's business.
Is the
but
Paris name synonymous with Rosebud?
That's
I'm
right.
surprised there wasn't a girl named Rosebud in the Paris.
no, they never did that.
They never did that.
No.
So why nursing for you?
Well, I think at that time it was the easiest. Was under the Cadet Corps. Came in under the Cadet Corps right at the end of the war in 1945.
Ooh, I did not know
And
that.
they paid for my education. Helped pay for my education.
That was wonderful. So it was a 3-year affair.
3 years.
And you
Full
had,
years.
You had to live in the building?
Yes, there were no outsiders. They
And
did not have.
You couldn't go home at night after
No.
classes?
you could
So-
go home on your day off.
Or maybe you had a weekend. They
Here
would
and
give you a
there.
weekend off. Your night leave was 10:15.
That was the late leave.
Late
9:30.
leave, yeah.
9:30 we had to be in.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that truly amazing?
And the nun, Sister Mary Patrick, can't forget her. She checked the rooms, make sure you were there.
Isn't that amazing?
So that was back in 45 to 48 that I was there.
But a lot of lessons learned.
Yes, that's
Yes.
true.
Now, did you both stay in nursing for a long time?
I did.
I did also.
I retired in 1993, and I was in nursing all that length of time. I graduated in 48, but I worked down at Memorial Hospital in Albany for 30-odd years.
Oh, you did really? How about you?
I worked full-time till 93, and then I worked part-time until 2001. Occasional
And
part-time.
then we have Marcy, who still works.
and
She still works more than the average bear, I'll tell you that. You can't stay away.
I know, I just love it.
Well-
It's changing, but I still like the patients. I like the patient contact, and I still work 2 days a week. In fact, I just got off the phone with Joanne Wood, who scheduled me through August. So, there you go.
It's nice to look at the list of employees who've been here for 50 years, 48 years, 40 years, 32 years. Isn't it great?
Part of my career I spent with Dr. A.B. de Grand Prix, as you know.
Of course.
Yes, I was 24 years with him.
Oh, my
And I
goodness.
helped him both at the hospital and the office, so it was a full-time job.
Well, they used to say, what did they say about MacArthur? Old soldiers never die. Old nurses are here for a while too, you know.
Fade away.
And I use that word old affectionately
Right.
because we interviewed some nurses who were approaching 100, I think, Calvin, when we interviewed them some years ago, who went to this school and to Champlain Valley. But we awaited the 100th anniversary of Champlain Valley with bated breath because we knew there would be stuff. We started to interview Marcy in the new chapel. And at the end of it all, she says, "Oh, I forgot I brought a couple of books with me." And they were delightful. And then Calvin found this wonderful Frost book, Plattsburgh, New York, a city's first century, Dr. Frost. You all know him probably.
Yes.
And he's a wonderful guy who's written several books. He loves to walk and hike, and he's got the best trimmed beard in the county, and you know. And Calvin found several references that we were looking for because we started to look through this book, and we found pictures, and we found benefactors, and this gentleman's name is Loyal Smith. We had trouble thinking of his first name for a while when we were doing our last program, so we deferred that comment until Calvin found his picture. Maybe I can hold up his picture for our audience to look at here in the book without disrupting any of Calvin's nice blue markers. And he had a great deal to do with helping out various buildings, architecture, and so on in the city. And here we are, Champlain Valley Hospital, $25,000 for the building fund. That was big money back in those days. $200,000 for the Loyal L. Smith Fund to support 5 free beds for patients in need. Isn't that great? He also gave $35,000 toward the new building at the YMCA, and another $100,000 to the Loyal L. Smith Fund for maintenance. The Vilas Home for elderly women, still very much, and it's just such a beautiful place in town here. 50,000. Home for the Friendless, which I've talked about often, 50,000. City Hall, which we learned from Keith Herkelo, the city clerk, in one of our very first programs as we toured the building, $200,000 for construction of Plattsburgh's first City Hall building. And education, up to $1 million to an educational fund to pay college tuition for Clinton County boys. What happened to the girls?
That's right.
Isn't it
Where were they?
amazing how things were back in those days?
It is amazing.
There weren't very many male nurses when you folks started.
But when we were talking a few minutes ago about how long we'd been in nursing, it occurred to me to mention that when we were in training, it was just females. And I don't think there were any males for a good number of years.
No, the only males in the hospital were the male attendants, what they call male attendants. Well, of course, they're working in the hospital.
And very few, if any, female doctors back then.
There were
Or
not
none.
very many.
No, I was just looking through here, and there were not any
Dr.
female
Copeland was
doctors.
probably one of the
She was
early
an
ones.
anesthesiologist, yeah.
And I don't know how long Dr. Lickety's been here, but it's
Good number
good
of years.
number of
yeah.
years.
After our time.
Well, thankfully, things have changed so much since the beginning because we remember our school days. School days. How many male teachers were there when we were kids?
Well, I
Think
went.
about
We
it.
had some
You did.
in Chattagay.
No,
Well, I certainly never had any male teachers until high school.
I went to St. John's, and we had the nuns.
So,
And
you
we
were
did have a
destined.
few that- yes.
You were destined
You
to
were
be with the
practically a
nuns,
saint.
and she
No,
still is. Look
we
at
had
that
a
face.
phys ed director, but in those days it was chiefly the boys that had the sports.
Oh, sports. That's another thing too. Of course, there was certainly no girls' athletics in school,
No.
anywhere in school.
Not when I went to school.
Even though most of the females were better athletes than I was. I went to grade school with a young girl who beat me in marbles, and she still kids me about it today. I would go home and my mother said, "You lost marbles to a girl?" I love it. But things have changed a great deal.
They have.
Considerably.
It's been good. It's been good because I think one of the things that helped to increase the remuneration which nurses received was because some men got into it.
Possibly, because for years we were notorious for not getting a very high salary.
We had,
We worked a full 8-hour day, but our salary was rather low. Our hourly wage.
Now, you said you got help paying for the schooling
Well, just for the 3 years,
for the
yes.
3 years. How about you?
I didn't. My parents.
Do either of you, do you remember how much it cost?
I think
I don't
I'm
remember.
almost embarrassed to report it now because education is so expensive. I think my total was $1,000
For the 3 years.
for the 3 years, and
That
the
surprises
most
me. I thought it would have been even lower than that.
the most was for the first year, and it was less for the second, and not very much for the third.
Isn't that? And you both graduated in the same year? No?
No, I graduated in 48.
And I was a year later, 49.
And
I'm a
you-
49er.
Room and board, include the
Did that
Yes, that
include your
include room
food
and
and
board.
everything?
Oh, they
Oh, yes,
included
on
everything.
board.
So that's not bad for $1,000
Did
bucks.
did we have a uniform fee?
I
We
don't
might have-
remember, of course,
No?
my memory
So-
isn't
so
the
they-
greatest, but I don't remember any uniform fee, but they did supply the student uniforms.
They
In,
did?
in some of these books, it says the tuition was $658 for 3 years.
But that was before us, though, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
That was early on.
But
Yeah.
still in all, by today's standards,
It was,
the room and
Nothing.
board would be
Peanuts.
far more than that.
Right.
But dollars were different. Dollars had a different value as they do all the time.
I don't know how they could do it
I don't either.
with, and doing our uniforms for us and,
But
Nobody was making
they
the big
didn't
bucks
pay.
back in those days.
No.
They didn't, the students manned the hospital. I mean, they had the nuns for supervisors and we had some RNs were supervisors on each unit, probably 3 to 11 and 11 to 7. But other than that, it was the students that were on the units.
There.
You know,
That
you had
shows-
your freshmen, your junior, and your senior students, and they're the ones that did the bedside nursing care.
I can remember I took my OR training in the second half of my first year, and I was back in the OR almost, well, maybe more than once a year for the rest of my training. I loved it, and I guess Sister knew I loved it. Every time they needed somebody, they sent me back there, and I didn't object because I liked it, you know.
You liked it in the OR.
I loved it.
Everybody, all the nurses I've talked to had preferences. Some liked the critical care, some liked the maternity ward. You were in maternity for how long?
Well, I was in maternity in the old hospital, but the new wing, and then I went into teaching, so I kind of left maternity for a while, but now I've been back in maternity for almost 20 years in that area.
And you remember my sister-in-law, Ruth.
I remember Ruth Lapierre. She was the head nurse in the nursery and ran a real tight ship and did a wonderful job.
Looking back now, and you know that getting into nursing is not easy anymore, and the requirements are more stringent than ever. But you people were very well trained. I've got to tell you something. Before I came up here a couple days ago, we were down in Virginia with another one of my wife's sister, and Dottie Trevor has been a nurse and then a teaching nurse like you for. She's still going strong, well into her 70s. And I said we were coming here to talk to the three of you, and she said, "Those are real nurses."
That's what we always told people.
But you know, she started to talk about the uniform. What uniforms do real nurses wear these days compared to what you had to wear?
Well, for one thing, I'm sure that they don't have to have inspection every once in a while, which we did usually right after breakfast. Church, breakfast, and then Sister might have you line up in what they called the clinic at that time, and she inspected you from your cap to your toes, and if they were not up to snuff, you went back to the nurse's home to get up to snuff.
Sounds like the military. There was an inspection every day for you
Well,
too?
not every day.
No, I don't-
They called it.
I don't remember that, but we had, the students had blue and white uniforms and white and stiff collars that were starched, very stiff, and cuffs
Cuffs.
that you had to, put together to
And-
put
and
on
the
every
cap.
morning.
Cuffs.
Don't forget the cap.
And then over this you had a bib and an apron, a gathered type apron.
Of course, I've seen the pictures.
Yes.
Don't you love it?
And of course we always had to
I'm
wear
sorry
a cap.
I didn't keep one.
I don't think I have one either.
You didn't? None of you kept it? Even your caps?
Oh, I have
Oh,
my
I have a
cap.
cap.
Yes.
The
And I
cap
have
was...
my cape.
Well,
We had
Oh, the
beautiful
capes.
capes.
But
Yeah.
after
Oh.
graduating, we had white uniforms, white stockings,
right.
white shoes, and our cap.
So
Everyone
there were-
wore a cap. For a good number of years, they had caps. We wore caps.
When did caps stop, Mars?
Oh, gosh. Must be.
Because that's what most people remember, the caps.
They do. And if
probably remember-
people see a cap, they say there's a real nurse.
Well, I told you. I wasn't kidding you.
I think the caps went as the technology got greater, and the nurses were trying to take care of the IVs and the equipment that was on the floor. The nurses in the emergency room, I think in an intensive care, found them a hazard, and it kind of,
Well, I think also after all, when it went from 3-year then to 2-year and a college, I think that's when the caps went out. Because
Oh,
I don't think any of the colleges really had caps, because I don't remember this college with, maybe they did, but I don't remember it.
I don't.
Well, it sounds like it was a great uniform. And I bet you somewhere in this memorabilia that you folks brought, there's a picture. Pictures of any of you with your uniforms on?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
we'll find those too.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure there are some other things. Now, Calvin wanted me to look at some things in the book here. Oh, the high school. I love this stuff. Did you find several references to the hospital in this book besides that, Calvin? We'll pause for a minute. Now you see what the nurses look like. Those weren't the students, though, were they, Mars?
No.
Okay, but we do have pictures also of students, right? This is where in your book. This is a very teeny tiny picture under my finger on this hand. If Calvin can get a picture of that. You got it? He's very quick. Now, who's that a picture of?
I don't have my glasses on. It's two of my classmates.
Oh, really?
Right.
So that would have been which year?
Well, that probably is 46 and 47, the year. Because we were there 45 through to 48.
Now, we were just talking. Wait a minute. You got another one, Marcy.
Yes.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that's a student uniform.
Student uniform right over here,
With the
Calvin.
striped top and the white bottom.
Oh, isn't that great? Is that why we now call the people candy stripers that come and volunteer? It almost looks like that kind of a uniform, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, we were talking about work weeks and how the work week has changed. And back at the turn of the 20th century, you know, many people worked 14, 16-hour days, 6 and 7 days a week. Of course, farm people worked every single day. But you said, first of all, you told me, Ag, that you didn't get much time off in the summer. When you went for nursing 3 years, you only got a couple weeks off.
We got 2 weeks off, I think, in the year. And most of us took our vacation, I think, in the summertime,
Right.
as I recall.
I think we had a total of a month, but
Did we get 4 weeks a year?
yes, we got 4 weeks vacation. Everybody did, all students. And then we took them at different times whenever it was convenient.
Yeah, everybody couldn't get
Right.
off on the
That's
same
right.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And you worked 6 days? You went to school 6 days or five and a half? Or how
It
did
seems
that
to
work?
me
It
that
seems
we
we
were
were
5.5.
Well, I can't remember exactly. I know that we worked, we went on duty on the units, on the floors in the morning, and then I don't remember that we had lunch and then went to class after that. And depending on the number of hours we worked in the morning, we would go back at 3 o'clock and work till 7. But it was a combination of maybe of
Can you imagine
6, 7,
asking
8
young
hours.
people to do that today?
No, but it was a divided schedule.
Plus, there were classes, but a lot of it was on-the-job training, and it has to be.
Well, I think that's what was so good about the whole program. We had so much hands-on. And when you're doing things, you remember so much better if you do hands-on, if you actually do the thing. So, and you felt more confident, and I think it made you a better nurse.
Well, I think that you felt, as you said, more confident when you finished. Most of us, I don't think, had any qualms about taking charge of a floor or,
That's pretty
whatever.
amazing all by itself when you stop to think about it today.
Well, if you took charge of a floor, you were probably there with a group of students, and they might be probationers or first year or second year, and you were lucky if you had some seniors.
That is truly amazing. So
But-
you literally learned on the job, and even though technology then wasn't what it is today,
That's correct.
throughout your careers, you learned.
Yes, you did learn a lot because during my years, she say like the OR, but the patients after surgery, we did not have recovery rooms. They were watched, I think, a short time in surgery, and then were returned to the units. And each
No, I
student,
didn't
whoever
know
was
that.
assigned to that
No
patient, you
recovery
sat
room,
with
that's
that
right.
patient until they became aware of their assignings and
Oh,
of
my.
their
You had
of
to recover
surroundings.
them on the floors.
Right.
Did
And
you
so-
really?
You'd have
And
to
they had-
assign somebody to sit with that one until,
Right, and you
Till-
had to
until they
have somebody had to be at that bedside until they were awake
know-
enough to know where they were.
That's
And
a wonderful factor. I never would have thought of that.
Well, when you think of all the different departments that are there today, like PACU and ambulatory surgery and all these different things, we did it all. I mean, we were every kind of nurse that you could imagine.
You know, you wore the cap and you wore every other figurative hat that there was to wear throughout your
That's
entire
right.
career.
That's right.
But what a way to learn.
You learned many things.
That
It
must-
was a wonderful way.
You know, for the life of me, I don't want to take anything away from the nursing education today or the tremendous dedicated staff of nurses that we have here and in all hospitals. But it's just that we want to tell people how much it has changed. And that's why we started calling you real nurses.
Today, of course, with all the technology and the different types of cases that they're doing now that we didn't do in our day, you have a lot more complicated case to take care of.
Right.
Even
Many
though you have recovery room and intensive care and all these other units, the girls pretty much are, I say girls because it's still more girls than boys in nursing, have a tremendous amount of
Responsibility.
knowledge
yeah, right.
and just taking care of some of this equipment is horrendous.
The world is more diverse and specialized when you talk about physicians. Look at how many GPs are there left
Not
in
enough.
the world? Certainly
No.
not very many that make home visits, I'll tell you that.
That's right.
That's right.
Because babies aren't born at home anymore. And
And Dr. Larson with his Da Vinci, I mean, it's really amazing what the different things that are being done today and the way they're doing surgery. Less invasive. Patients are getting better so much
to
faster.
you who have watched this not from the very beginning, but for a long time since the mid-1940s, today must be like Star Wars to you. To go in surgery and see how they do it with the robots. Huh?
With,
Would be for me.
Yeah.
Because I haven't worked with all the machinery and all the new innovations that they have.
It's marvelous for Calvin and myself to go in the new surgery units here. We love to brag about our medical center here because it has grown so tremendously since
That's
the
true.
original physicians hospital was in what we would effectively call a big house. You
Right.
know, I was born in a big house. It was called a nursing home in those days, but it was a small hospital, and that's the way many small hospitals were back in those days. So you stayed, but you didn't have to. Did you have to stay on the so-called campus over there all day long? You couldn't take a walk down to the candy store at noon, or?
Oh, we could, if on our time off, we could go. We were told, that we couldn't go certain places. And, we weren't supposed to go into bars and things like that. But
Why does that not surprise me at all?
The favorite place for a group of nurses, of course, there was no smoking in those days. It was in the nurses' residence, and no one was really supposed to smoke, but there were a few that did. And any time off they had, they would go down the driveway to Carrie's grocery store.
That's right.
And he put up with all these students, all these girls who would go down there and have their break and have their cigarettes. And then he'd
Carrie's grocery store, where
Carrie's
was that?
grocery store. It was
sort of at the end of the driveway.
at the end of the driveway.
Oh, it was
on River
right
Street.
there, right
Yeah,
here.
Right.
Just a short
right.
distance. Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to remember his first name and which Carrie that was, and I couldn't come up with it.
He probably has descendants who might be watching the show.
They were wonderful people.
Yes,
Yes, they
That
were.
store, they were so
let the
good to the
nurses- let them
students.
Have their cigarettes.
Isn't that amazing? Now, and we're doing this. And by the way, we're talking with Marcy Cavanaugh, Suzanne Paris, and Agatha McDonald, three of the wonderful real nurses from Champlain Valley School of Nursing. What year did you graduate?
1953.
53. So we've got a wealth of experience here, and we'll let people do their own mathematics. But we're doing this at a time where in the news the tax on cigarettes has gone so high that people in New York City are going to pay $10 a pack.
That's not much more than
So-
what they're going to pay here, I understand.
Well, if the cigarettes
it was
didn't
not.
kill you, then the money,
Yeah.
how much they cost would. So and you know, here's something we might even interject here. When I started smoking, I won't tell you what brand of cigarettes, but the company spent a lot of money on ads in magazines and newspapers saying, doctors say you should have so many cigarettes during a meal to aid digestion.
You're kidding.
Cigarettes
That's a new
were
one to
said
me.
to be.
I haven't heard that
were said-
one.
I have the ads at home from Life magazine, of all places, way back when, saying that cigarettes were good for you. And it took us a while for the Surgeon General to finally get it on the pack,
Right.
I'll tell you
Well,
that.
I would say
Well, the
one-
nuns didn't think it was good for
No,
them.
I'm sure they didn't. That wasn't good for you if they found out either, right?
I would say one thing. I think as nurses, we probably would not have smoked if we had known the dangers.
Well, nurses were notorious for smokers.
Right, but I mean, I don't think we would have ever started. We didn't really hear much about the dangers until Dr. Galati hit town.
Oh, really? Oh,
That's true.
that's
Yeah,
cool. No
right.
kidding.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, there's some
no, you
people that
didn't-
carry
you didn't
these
hear about
crosses
that.
with them, you know. And
The only
want-
danger that we had was one of the girls who smoked would getting caught smoking in their rooms. That was the danger they
Well,
had
that
in
was
those
a
days.
that was a
Was
terrible
anybody
day.
expelled for that? I know they were expelled for sneaking out, but
No one actually got
I was,
caught doing
I was
that.
kicked out of a college for it, if you can believe that. I
Really?
won't mention which one on this program,
Oh.
because there are many graduates who watch the show. But the dean of students would go and put his fingers through the ashtray in my car to find out if there are any warm ashes in there. So that, you know, we've all come a long way since that time. I wanted to show this wonderful picture of Mamie Cavanaugh.
Me.
Is it Mame or Mamie?
Maine.
Mame Cavanaugh. Did you all know her?
Yes.
Yes, we all know.
Okay. Now wait a minute. Tell me about how you knew her.
I met Mame in 1950 when I came into training. She was the head nurse in the men's ward. And she took every student under her wing. And of course, as students, you were scared and felt a little uneasy at first, but she would try to make you feel really comfortable. And she used to tell me the story of how she got here. She came from Ottawa at 18 years old, and when she arrived in Plattsburgh at the station, there was only the station master there. And of course, Plattsburgh didn't have any street lights or much lighting. She told me they had lighting probably as far as where O'Neill Redden's home was, down on Brinkerhoff Street. And from there to the hospital, it was absolutely dark, and she was very scared.
Wow.
Because she was a young girl and she was with the station master, and she told me when they knocked on the door and the nuns opened the door, she was so happy. And also, when they came like that from other places, they had to have money to go back home in case they weren't accepted.
Oh.
So she brought money to go back in case the nuns didn't keep her. But of course they did. She was.
Think about that. I want to just read what Dr. Frost wrote underneath this picture. Mame Cavanaugh, she was born Hallinan, that must have been her maiden name, graduated from Champlain Valley Hospital School of Nursing in 1915, then worked there off and on until age 79, as you said, Marcy. She told me how in the early days nurses would greet their patients in the morning, ask what they wanted for breakfast, and go cook the meals.
Absolutely.
Oh, it says, I don't think my own health insurance plan covers that. I love his humor there. People told me when Mame Cavanaugh did you up, you knew you'd been done up.
Absolutely.
Isn't that wonderful?
A bed bath was the height of everything. When you got a good bed bath, then you had gotten good care in the morning.
Isn't
Well, that
that?
was always the morning routine. The
That's right.
patients, I don't remember whether it was the night staff or when we first came on, you pulled out a basin of water and a washcloth, and they had washed their face and hands before breakfast. And then breakfast is served on the units by, I think that there was an attendant somebody in the kitchen, but the food was all brought up on the dumbwaiter and served from the kitchen. All trays were served individually then. And then you gave the patients their breakfast, and then after breakfast, every patient had a complete bed bath, regardless of their condition.
It probably doesn't happen that way today anymore.
You happened to mention Mame Kavanaugh arriving when it was dark all around the hospital and nursing
City.
home. When I was in training, I can remember that behind the nursing home, none of that area was developed yet. You know, it was practically in the
Well,
woods.
that's
It
true
was- it
too,
was
when you
pasture.
stop to
It
think
was
about
on
that.
last place on Ruger Street,
Hey,
I believe.
Well, Ruger Street was a dirt road until the 1940s. Parts of Ruger Street, especially up above. Oh,
Right, so that's why Carrie's grocery store was so,
was such a popular.
was so popular.
isn't that wonderful?
And Gordy, I would just like to say this. Mame was telling me all about this one day. She lived on Oak Street, and I was staying with her for a while till her daughter went shopping. And she said, you know, the nuns taught us everything, all these little things. And she said, I can remember Sister Vitalis telling us how to walk at night with a spoon and a glass and not make any noise.
Come on.
And I thought
I've
that
never
was
heard that
really
before.
precious.
How to walk at night with a spoon and a glass?
Sister Vitalis, when I was the head nurse in the men's ward when I was in training, you mentioned that
Uh-huh.
Mame was there when you got there.
Yes.
And now who had this photograph? Is this?
Uh,
This is.
Marcy had
is-
it.
Okay, now, tell me what this shows.
Well, let
I'm
me
going
see.
to turn it over so you can see what it is.
That is, we had an open house, and that is Mame Kavanaugh attending the open house. And I'm not sure, what year was that, Gordy?
Well, it says 1972, 1992.
1992.
That's 18 years ago already.
That's right.
I know. Well, we had an open house, and it was very lovely, and a lot of people came. But at that time, everyone looked to Mame because she was a very popular
old guard.
person. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the old guard, that's exactly right. How long did she live, by the way?
She lived to be 107, and she was just as
We don't
sharp.
remember what year she died.
Oh,
Figure that out.
Well, up into the 90s, though.
yes.
Was she over 100 when these pictures were taken, do you think?
Yes, I'm sure she was.
You
Isn't
were thinking in
that-
92, wasn't it?
Yes.
in 1992.
So that's 18
And
years ago.
that is me standing there with Mame. And we were not related at all, but we were like relatives.
Well, you
And
know, I'm
she
so glad
always-
Calvin found this picture in the Dr. Frost book, because look at the conversation that it sparked here today. And you wondered what you were going to talk about. Come on.
You talk about feeling like family. I think that those of us, and I noticed that the old guard, the ones who graduated from the 3-year program and lived at the nurses' home, were always kept a closer relationship than those since who, because from the time they went part-time to the community college, that group you don't hear much about when we have our annual banquet.
That's right.
It's a different atmosphere, a
think
different
it's-
camaraderie.
It's just a lack of the bonding
Yeah.
that
right.
took
Yes, because
place.
everybody lived at home.
Yes.
They lived
And they
at
just
home.
commuted, and they weren't,
That's the
you
difference.
did not
You-
do that.
You
then.
people were there for
Right.
all those hours a day in a week, and you were essentially family.
That's
and we
right.
had to put up with each other.
And the nuns at the same time, right, Suze?
Right.
Well, we're going to pause for just a moment. Then we're going to talk some more. And we have all these yearbooks and all these pictures and all these newspaper articles to chat about. So don't leave us, because we're talking about the 100th anniversary of Champlain Valley Hospital. We're talking about the 100th anniversary of Champlain Valley Hospital with three ladies who know from firsthand experience, because they were there. We were talking about some cute things when the camera was off, about hems. Were they always that straight?
Probably not.
Well, they certainly looked that way, Marcy.
Well, if there was a picture to be taken or anything like that, they were all straight. And they were inspected. And if they weren't straight, the picture was not taken until they were.
Did the nuns check that out?
They did.
Isn't that? And how about the stockings? Did it always have to have the seam in the back? Do you remember
Well,
that?
I don't know. I don't ever remember anyone being sent off duty because the seams weren't straight. But I'm sure that pretty much we went to work with straight seams, because at that time I don't think there were any seamless stockings.
I don't
I'm
think
sure
so
not.
either.
I don't
think
remember.
so either. But there was never any question you had to wear the stockings as part of it.
Never.
Ooh, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So
I was part of the uniform.
yeah,
That's right.
It's just like I compared it to the military earlier, because the uniform in each branch of the service is very, very important, and they
Right.
all have their distinctive features. And I'm sure among hospitals, your uniform wasn't universal, was it?
No, it was not. Each school of nursing had their own
did.
uniform. And each school had their own style cap. So you recognized the school of nursing
Nursing.
from whatever cap that person was wearing.
There are many things that are color-coded in this medical center today, but I'm not sure you would recognize a student nurse when she walked down the hallway here, would you today?
Well, actually, I don't know if you would recognize the people in the housekeeping department as compared to nurses, unless you read their
Yeah.
name tag.
Name
I always try, but I have this strange vision, so people know when I'm moving my glasses, I'm trying to see what their name
Isn't that
is.
true?
Well, Clinton students wear a a navy blue, and the college, they do have a uniform too. And so they both schools come here for their clinical
We are,
education.
again, we're talking about the olden days here, and some people cringe when they say way back when in the
Way back
olden
when.
days. But it's so much a part of history, and I'm in favor of studying history. But we are fortunate to have such good nurses training in our community these days, aren't we? When you consider the college and you consider Clinton Community College,
Yes, because
and
we've
all
always
these resources.
they've always had a nursing program. I mean,
Yes.
either the hospitals and the college had
Ever since the
a
Great
four-year
Unseen.
four-year nurse teacher course at the college. I don't know if they're still doing that or not, but
Probably, but when
CV Tech and something too?
CV Tech has nursing
Yes,
programs
and
today too.
I taught in that one.
You were up there, yeah, I
Yeah.
know you were, and I know several people, several retired nurses who are now teaching nurses who teach certain courses up there,
Yes, they do.
surgical classes and treatment and other things. So we are fortunate. And when you stop to think about it, how many nurses who got their training in Plattsburgh are now in myriad hospitals all over the country and in the world. I've met people in Florida. Where did you get your training? Plattsburgh. That's good. We're
That's
on the
true.
map in many ways, not just for rosebud creamery milk, No, but
No,
that's
we can't
great.
forget that.
No, we can't.
I mentioned the alumni banquet a few minutes ago, and that's another thing that we've noticed, that we have some of the older, the ones who belong to the alumni are all have all graduated 31 years or more ago. And yet,
Like this over your shoulder.
we still have responses. In fact, some people come to this banquet. They might come from North Dakota or California or Florida, or some of them plan, I think, to be in this area at the time. That's why we've fixed on a certain date, second Saturday in August, to have the banquet.
How many organizations like this are still active in the country? Yours has been going forever and ever and ever.
It's 94 years this year.
Isn't that wonderful?
Stop thinking about it. Right.
Nobody here's been going for 94 years.
Not yet.
But
Not
it's,
yet,
it's
but-
awfully nice to have that kind
We're
of tradition.
39.
But now with the internet and email and Facebook and even telephones and letters, a lot of you do stay in touch with each other. And you've mentioned that before.
We do, especially at Christmas time. Those like from Florida and Alaska and many other different places. I still hear from 10 of my classmates out of 25.
You know, that's considering
That's
Every-
right.
That's
Everything.
good because I don't. Yeah.
And we noticed that if you, the people who are having like anniversaries, like 25, 30, 35, 40 years, those people will try and get some of their classmates together. So a lot of times you'll find that 5 or 6 or 7 are coming from a
Right,
certain
from the
class.
older classes.
how many people make the banquet every year, would you guess?
Well, I think Agatha can answer that.
Last year, I think we had, did we say 80 nurses and 110 attended maybe? Because we do have some guests. And this
That's
year,
great.
About
That's wonderful.
80 nurses last year. Imagine
That's
when
fabulous.
the school closed in 79.
Think about that. You know, it's not like a school reunion where they're graduating a class every year,
Right.
You're right.
isn't it? Well, you got a picture there that looks kind of neat. What's
Well,
that?
that's apparently her class of September '49.
Is that you? I want to see that one on the bottom.
That was that was.
Whoops.
during their student
I'm
days.
sorry, Calvin. It's great to look at these yearbooks. Did you have a yearbook every year? Was there a yearbook every single year from the
Not-
beginning?
Not every single year. Remember, I told you, Gordy, that the year that I graduated, 53, the class of 52 must have done something really bad because
I hope somebody's listening from that
we were
class.
told that we could not be trusted any further than Carrie's store. So we could
Oh,
not.
don't you love it?
We could not have a yearbook.
Oh, come on.
So I was very sad
Look at
about
this
that.
face and look at this face and tell me that it can't be trusted.
I was really
Of course,
sad.
we didn't know you in 1953.
No, that's right. At 18
Is it-
years old, I
Oh,
suppose
isn't that amazing?
I was a normal 18-year-old.
Isn't that wonderful? I want to show this for 1 second because this is a little brochure talking about the alumni. This is for one of your recent banquets.
Yes, the past few years.
I want to mention that because the logo was created, designed, produced, and printed by this lady sitting right next to me here. And it was so unique and relatively simple that they decided to use it through the years.
Yes.
School of Nursing, CVH,
and they weren't
CV,
considered.
CVPH.
They were the next
And it's all the 3 schools together. And it's includes from 1913 to 2010 as of August 14th this year.
So is that when you'll have it, August 14th?
August 14th.
Who was the oldest, do you remember who was the oldest person was at the banquet last year? Do you remember? From what class
Let me
would it
see.
be?
Betty Duval didn't make it last year, did she?
No,
Thelma Neville didn't make it.
no. Thelma is the oldest living alumni member, Thelma
I think
Neville.
they did a story about her in the newspaper too recently, And we talked about her, I think, last time.
Kennedy, one of the oldest.
I would say so. B. Kennedy.
I'm not sure.
What class would that be?
I don't remember. Believe me.
Probably from the late 20s, maybe?
I would say from the early 30s.
Early 30s?
Yes.
That's pretty darn good. When you consider I wasn't born until 1937.
Well, the late 30s or the early 40s, maybe.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
The late
I
30s.
think
Yeah.
late 30s or early 40s are.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the years. My sister and I are the ones getting the responses back and keeping track of everything. That's how come I happen to know that much about it.
That's wonderful. I bet the table conversation at these banquets is amazing. I
It
would
is.
It
love to
is.
have a little
It
microphone hidden somewhere.
Absolutely.
When we're hearing what they call the backstories in the media, the ones we may not even get here today.
Remember when? That's right.
Oh.
Remember when?
Right, right.
Yes.
I bet the people who worked in that store would have a few stories too. Huh?
Oh, they
Well, I think
certainly
that Mr. and Mrs. Carey were the only ones who worked there, weren't they?
They ran
Was
it.
it
Well, they
family?
ran the store.
Is that what they call mom and pop groceries?
Yes.
Probably.
There
yes,
aren't too
that
many,
was
but
it.
there are still a few. Unfortunately, because of the way things are in the world, there aren't too many of those mom and pop stores and businesses, but I love to see it when they are. Yes, go ahead.
You know, I just wanted to say a few things about the admission requirements.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Back then. You needed to have a personal letter, 2 recommendations from people, one preferably a clergyman to attest to your good moral character, and qualifications suitable for the profession, a physician's certificate, and then so that they had to, we had to have sound health and unimpaired faculties, a certificate of vaccination, and then another certificate that the school would furnish and you had to make out. Now, in those days, lying or cheating, if anyone was found doing either one of those 2 things, you were immediately dismissed. They felt that those qualities were very, very crucial. And so, and I do remember a person who was apparently lied about something, and it was proven, and they were dismissed from the program.
That would be a terrible disgrace, wouldn't it have been? Did you ever know anybody that was expelled when you were there?
Well, I knew some that were expelled, but I didn't know any who were expelled for that particular thing. I can remember one of the upperclassmen was expelled because she had gone out the new wing window late in the evening.
Oh, I won't be telling the stories about climbing the drain pipe in the girls' dorms. There are other reasons I got kicked out of a couple of schools in the older days. But I can understand that the requirements were very strict, and I'm
They
not
were.
being facetious, but when they said, good character and good health, it was determined by the nuns that nurses had to be upstanding.
And you could be suspended for various reasons also, that you had to make up, the only way you had to make up that time after you finished in September, you had to make up the time after that, after you graduated.
really?
After you finished, right.
Wow,
If you had some suspension time to make up.
isn't that?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I can see wheels turning in the heads here. This book you're reading to me from is a very early School of Nursing, Champlain Valley Hospital, Plattsburgh, New York announcement. Susan Burke, class of 1931. And Susie entered training in 1928 and graduated October 1931. How did you come by this?
She gave it to me.
She did.
Yes, she did. Susan passed away 2 years ago now, And but she did give me that maybe 10 years ago. Because I've been president of the Alumni Association, I guess, people have given me these little treasures over the years. And I intend...
Treasures, that's what they are.
They are treasures. And I intend to give them to, when we put all our artifacts at Clinton Community College in the alumni house there, when things are ready, all of these things are going to be there for the community to see and
that's
enjoy.
as it should be, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I don't want them to be in attics somewhere because there's too much history, too much wonderful history to
There's
allow
so
that.
much wonderful history in attics and dresser drawers and basements.
Yeah.
And, you know, Calvin and I are perhaps two of the biggest offenders on the face of the earth. But the offender is, I use that word delicately because we love to collect things connected with history for ourselves. But I believe a lot of these things that are hidden away should be on display. Anybody can come and look at my stuff just about any time. Calvin loves old maps and books, and he's buying things all the time. And we did a whole show just on his collection of items. But I noticed here in education that you had to have at least 2 years of high school, but special preference was given if you graduated from an accredited high school.
When I was in training, we had to have a high school.
Yeah, you had to have high school, and you had to have certain
And they prefer to
sciences.
college entrance.
You were supposed to have
diploma.
had biology and microbiology, but I never had biology, but I got in anyway for some reason.
You know, they had a catch-all biology kind of general science course when I was in high school, because my high school was only about this big. But I think, you know, you talked about how many people survive from this nursing school today. Every one of the people who graduated in my high school class in 1955 is still alive. Of course, there were less than a dozen, but there must have been some good air in the old Moira High School back in those days. But it's amazing how many nurses, and they still have that wonderful spirit, that attitude where they want to help other people. That's got to be built in, isn't it? Is it something you didn't learn that in the School of Nursing. You must always have liked to help people.
You must
both-
have the
all of you.
tendency, I think, to
Right, but they helped it
Yeah.
along. You know.
Yeah.
a caregiver.
Well, you know, being women with that maternal instinct, I think that helps. But, you know, I know a lot of male nurses.
I know
as
I know
well.
some very good male nurses
I've
too.
known many who
who are
worked here over the
caring and-
years. Yeah.
Right.
We had over 1,000 nurses graduate from those schools of nursing, and we still send out over 200 announcements. But there are many more who, for one reason or another, don't want to be notified anymore.
Are there some you just haven't been able to find?
We haven't had too many announcements come back
That's
for
a
a
good-
return of address. I think we've only had one this year.
That's
Out of-
amazing.
Out of 200 and, I don't know, 50, 60 that we sent.
The fact that you get, you know, 80 to 100 people at your banquets every year, some years over 100 with everybody, would guess, right?
And it's been, if you look at the years, it's been gradually, but, you know, we're losing some to nature.
Losing some every year. I know in my class
Yes.
there's quite a few that.
And there's recidivism.
Yeah.
We are dwindling, but we intend to keep it going.
I don't think any of the three of you will be dwindling anytime in the next 30 or 40 years. So anyway, education requirements, age and physique, religion. It's a question that Calvin asked last time when we were talking, Marcy and me, up there in the chapel. We wondered if it was a sectarian school, if you had to be Catholic to go there, but that wasn't. Were you Catholic?
I
I am, yes.
And I was too.
But I
were
don't,
too,
no, you
right,
didn't
Mark?
I
have to be.
was too.
I think
Yeah.
most of us were in my class, but there were some who were not. But they were encouraged to come to church with us, with they.
Oh, yes.
Or,
Every day? You had to have chapel
No.
every day?
No, we did not. Just
Once a week.
Once a week,
But
Sunday
they
morning.
could go to the a religion of their choice
But
on the
we
weekend.
went, the Catholics went every day, didn't we?
Yes, we did every day.
Oh, did you? You had a
Yes.
mass every day?
Every day.
And we had prayer every
Yeah.
night at 7 o'clock on a certain floor in the nurses' home.
Did you really?
And
I like that.
All the girls came and we said our evening prayers.
Wow, I
That
think
was-
that's so.
We did not have that when I was in
Really?
training, no. We had the mass at the chapel
Mm-hmm.
on Sunday morning.
Another interesting thing was that even our father couldn't carry our suitcase to our room when we entered. No men off the first floor.
Ooh, no kidding.
No kidding.
Nobody climbed in that same window that the nurse climbed out of?
Well, the windows, I think, were kept locked from the
Oh.
inside, but
Oh, is that
she
it?
must have unlocked it. And unfortunately, somebody discovered it.
Oh, isn't
Well,
that
there were
amazing?
people in town that would also keep track of the students. If they knew you were a student,
Oh,
and
they'd
they
squeal
saw,
on you?
and they would squeal on you.
Oh,
They would, because there was one girl in my class who was reported she was slumming,
Calvin says I would have, yeah.
slumming at the Cumberland Hotel, and she got
Cumberland.
suspended for a short while.
Isn't that amazing? I just want to tell people what we're listening to. You know, this is not Saturday Night Live. We're at CVPH Medical Center at the boardroom with Marcy Cavanaugh, Suzanne Paris, and Agatha McDonald, talking about some precious history, some great memorabilia from Champlain Valley School of Nursing, from the early days up to the present time. You opened this book, and I read ahead. I got ahead of you, but I love it. Expenses. A fee of $25 payable upon entrance is required. This fee will not be returned. The hospital furnishes the first set of uniforms for the nurses who've been accepted into the training school, but preliminary students must furnish their own uniforms in accordance with specifications which will be furnished them upon their appointment. Textbooks, board, lodging, laundry, all furnished by the hospital. The uniforms and textbooks belong to the school and must be returned in case a pupil leaves or is dismissed during the course of instruction. After the expiration of the first 4 months, a monthly allowance of $8 is made to each pupil until graduation. That wouldn't even buy that first pack of cigarettes today.
I don't
Isn't that-
remember.
no, that's
we didn't,
amazing.
we didn't
We
get,
did not. We
we
did
did
not.
not
It
get
was
any,
then, but that we did not get
any
any.
allowance, no.
You didn't get any
No,
allowance?
we didn't get any
No.
allowance.
And I don't think there was that $25 fee. I mean, I think it was all part of whatever it was. the
This
first
was like in the late 20s, early
year. So, that was
30s.
quite a few years
Yeah,
before.
1931, we told, you know. But it's wonderful. I wanted to, you know, did the dining room look anything like that when? Probably not when you went there.
Well, it was similar.
Really?
It was similar.
Let's take a
Have
look
the-
at this nurse's dining room. That's pretty classy stuff.
There was a lady that worked there, and she kept everything nice and shiny and clean. And we ate an awful lot of pineapple and cherries.
Oh, did you really?
And
Why is that, I wonder?
well, I sort of think for some reason it was very plentiful, but I just refrained from those two for quite a
Did
few
you
years
really?
after.
You just got too much.
I
That's
think
like too
so.
much oatmeal when you were a youngster, but I still love oatmeal today. I hated spinach, but I love it now.
Yes, I think that was the way it with a lot of people.
Oh, that's
And then
wonderful.
we have a list of graduates, which is very valuable, from 1913, I believe, to 1927.
Oh my goodness.
And Mame Kavanaugh was listed in that one of the first classes there. Her
Isn't
name
that
is there.
just terrific? Well, it could because we saw her picture when she came here in 1915.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this Champlain Valley Hospital opened in 1910,
Mm-hmm.
but it was on the drawing board, so to speak, for some years before that, as I recall. They thought about it for a long time, and finally it evolved into what it was for such a long time. And for those people who didn't see our original show, were any of you still around when the big move came in 1972, was it?
Oh, yes. I was around and, in fact, helped that day of the moving of the patients from Champlain Valley Hospital to physicians. And it just went very smoothly. Everything was very well organized.
We mentioned that in our last program, and we've mentioned it several times because I know several people besides you who were involved in that move. And when you consider the logistics involved, the interesting relationship between the two staffs at the two medical facilities, a little friendly rivalry, if you will, and some townspeople were not necessarily in favor of this marriage between the two local hospitals. They each did their own thing on the other side of town, and then they were to merge. And so, let's just say if there had been speak out in the newspaper in those days, you would have received an eyeful. But that marriage, look at what that marriage has done for this regional medical center that we have today, and we all should be proud.
The cardiac unit for one,
So many
Right,
things.
yes, right.
The oncology center has been here for 20 years already. See, how many changes have Calvin and I noted with his hometown cable vision, Calvin Vision camera over there, just since we've been doing these shows over the years, and it seems like every year we have some great piece of news to report. So we're lucky to have this facility here.
We are, right.
Now, in those days, when you three were involved in nursing, health insurance was a kind of an unknown animal back in the 1940s.
Well, I can remember in the early days that even after I left the hospital, I was able to belong to the group, and I paid, I was working for Dr. Granprey, but I paid my insurance at the hospital. So
Oh,
they
you did?
Yes.
Ah.
And I don't remember how long that was for, but I do remember initially that happened. And I was grateful to be able to do it because paying in a group was much more economical than paying an individual,
Yeah.
Well, I always worked in a hospital setting, so I had and the hospital paid all my, I worked at Memorial Hospital in Albany for 30-odd years, and they always paid the full benefit.
Was that a union hospital?
No,
It wasn't. That was
No.
non-union.
it was non-union. Union tried several times, but they did not make it.
We've heard those stories. There probably will be other discussions in future programs about that, but that's a constant discussion everywhere.
Yes, because they were every year, or every couple of years, they would try to unionize
sure.
the nurses and the other staff, housekeeping and so on.
Yeah.
Well,
Of course, the same thing happened here, I think, that there started to be rumblings about
Oh,
them
sure.
wanting a union, and it came to a vote, I think, 2-3 times before it finally
Oh,
passed. And I have to confess I was not for it.
But you know that it's like everything else. The battle lines are drawn. There are lots of people in favor of unions and lots of people who are not.
If you were taking care of sick patients, how can you leave them if they call a strike?
that was always the question.
See,
Yeah.
I said we'd leave that discussion for another time, but
Right.
it's okay to have opinions about things. What else have we got to look at, my dear?
I remember at one time when the union was trying to get in, and this was after the move over at Physicians, and Dr. Reardon came to me one evening and said, "Oh, Marcy, please get the girls together and don't let them join the
Yeah.
union because it's not good for the patients, and he was just so concerned. So I said, well, I'll see what I can do.
Oh, so you got involved whether you liked it or not.
I did. I got drawn right into it.
Oh, what have you got there, young lady?
I think Marcy had those. It looks like there were two of the local, or the hospital, papers that were. One
From
is-
68 and 69.
Yeah, that was a little newspaper like.
Well, let's take this
And,
one is a little darker and it has the same logo, so let's.
Some of these people were very instrumental in, getting the moving Elizabeth
Oh
Cordick,
my goodness, who doesn't?
Marion
who-
St. Clair,
Oh, my
Margaret Smith. They were all wonderful leaders. They were our supervisors. And when we moved over here, they helped to make the move more smoothly, too.
Now, this is 1968. December 1968, before the move.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're talking of employees of CVPH Medical Center.
Mm-hmm.
How could we? I thought we didn't make the move until 1972.
Well, we didn't actually make the move, but there were a lot of preparation
Coordinated
and talk
efforts.
about it.
Okay, I
And
gotcha.
I think,
Wasn't there a building project going on over here?
yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that obviously it had to take place a long time before the actual move was made.
Yes.
And that was your little
So
publication.
this was the nursing service that was reorganized, and of course they had to include people from both hospitals. But it went very well.
Now, who's Mrs. Mary?
Mrs. Mary Kavanaugh, that is Maine.
Oh, that is Maine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. You used a different first name, or
Well, her name was Mary, but her nickname was Mame.
is that the
Everybody
way?
knew her as Maine.
It's Mame.
I
don't
don't know
ever
where
remember
that came from either.
Right.
She's not here to tell us anymore.
No, she isn't, but she has been greatly missed.
So how long did this publication last?
Maybe a year or two, and then it
Well, we
changed.
got 2 years
in-
here.
It may changed into something else, and it's pretty interesting. I think maybe the medical center has these in their records.
Yeah.
I think they kept
Well,
them.
we celebrated the diamond anniversary of Physicians Hospital a few years ago, number 75. We took a lot of tours of this facility. Unfortunately, we're not able to take those tours over at the old Champlain Valley Hospital. But there are very few people watching this program in Plattsburgh, maybe in Clinton County, who don't have a story they could add. And the beauty of a program like this is when you folks are talking, somebody's saying, hey, did you hear what she said? You remember when Uncle Joe was over there and had his appendix out in 1940, whatever, you know?
And when you had an appendectomy in those days, you stayed probably a week in the hospital.
I know. Well, you
Yeah,
know, when
we
you had
covered-
cataracts removed, it wasn't an outpatient operation.
No, it certainly was not.
Remember
With
those?
sandbags on top,
Yeah,
on each side of your.
Your head, right.
Now it's just, cataract removed, no problem.
None-
We'll take care
none
of that. You can go
whatsoever.
home this
Home.
afternoon, just don't
Do your
drive.
thing.
Isn't that amazing?
That's right.
Yeah.
Those parts are good.
Yeah, you know, we've interviewed a number of people who've been in the nursing business for a long time, and to have them, they have to study every day to learn new things, especially those who teach radiology and all the other things. You've got to stay up with it.
Well, I think the nurses now have to have a certain number of points. Isn't it? Every year they have to have a certain number of credits they have to have.
We have
prove they've
something
studied.
called a health stream, and we have to complete a lot of education on our own. The programs are in the computer, and we have to complete them by a certain date to keep up with everything that's going on.
Right, because it's continuous education that they have.
Well, it
It
really
is.
is. Look at, we know how many physicians do we know are still practicing into their 80s. Don Kasperzak is still coming in here at age 89, for example.
Oh, and then they have to have continuous education also. They have to prove that they've had courses over the years,
It's
too.
amazing. And Dr. de Grand Prix practiced for such a
yes.
long time.
I think he was 99 when he died, and I don't remember how long, but I'm sure he was well into his 80s when he was still doing surgical
Yeah.
assisting.
Yeah, and Calvin and I were so privileged to be able to interview him a couple of times
Yes,
with his wartime experiences, and
and
just
what a memory.
and I used to a memory. When we go to interview somebody, that's why I wrote all your names down here, because they're gone from my head in 5 minutes. And he would, how many slides did he have, Calvin? Maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 slides. He showed us in his living room, and with no notes in his hand, he's saying, that was George so-and-so, and that guy was Powell, and we called that guy Smokey, and he's talking, the early 1940s, remembering every name and every single
He
picture.
had a good one.
He was an amazing and
It was
wonderful guy,
amazing.
and I would say, how long you going to be hanging around one day? And he said, well, as long as I can make the stairs at Arnie's. And what a guy. What a
That's
wonderful,
true.
humble, but talented and caring man.
Yes.
Our little tribute to, we've talked about it before, but we sat down with some of the older doctors. The rodeo group, retired old
Yes.
doctors eat out,
That's right.
and we had so much fun. Calvin and I were on the floor laughing so much we could hardly, the stories are just wonderful.
I know.
What else have we got here, Marcy? You got some pictures?
Well, we have some pictures of the class of 49, and
Good year, huh?
and
Ta-da!
Agatha is, and Monica Downs is Monica Remillard, the Remillard family from Peru, and she was one of the seniors in 49.
Well, we might as well show their pictures. Your picture's in here, right, young lady?
I'm afraid that's it right there. On the other side, isn't
Oh,
it?
it is?
I
I don't
know.
know. No, I think it's
I'm
Linda
not sure. I
Danforth.
can't- Oh, no, that isn't me.
What page are you on?
All right.
We're going to find you,
Oh.
You think you can escape? The before and after picture, and they're essentially the same, right?
Of course.
Of course.
Monica,
Now,
Monica.
did any of you have any offspring who went into the nursing business?
Well,
Besides
actually,
your
I
sister?
never married and had no children. In fact, Marcia didn't either.
I was the only nurse in my family of all the years
Isn't that
of nursing. They
amazing?
were
We've had so
they
many
were
nurses in my
teachers,
family.
teachers in my
Teachers.
family.
Well,
I have a
same
daughter.
difference.
Right.
In many ways, right?
Right.
In many ways.
I do have a daughter that's a nurse in Austin, Texas, Regina. She works for a GI group there. And so we talk nursing quite a lot.
Isn't it that? And our daughter Barbie, who started her career at Clinton Community College and worked for some time here at CVPH, and went into critical care nursing and has worked for Mather Memorial Hospital on Long Island for more years than she wants me to mention on this program. But it's such an admirable profession.
I think you get a lot of satisfaction out of taking care of patients and seeing them recover and return to active.
You gave me, I have a vivid imagination, and you gave me a wonderful picture in my mind's eye when you told me how the early nurses had to sit by the bedside of surgical patients
Right.
while they while they were in recovery. And I could picture that. And if that isn't the Florence Nightingale moment, nothing is,
And before we always, of course, you never had piped in oxygen or piped in suction. You had
Something
suction
else.
machines and you had oxygen cylinders at the bedside that you had to handle. And so the modern inventions are great, I'll tell you that, when you don't have that to do.
Isn't that
It was
amazing?
really quite stressful, I think, to take care of a patient from the operating room table to
It
the
was.
patient's room, and where you turned the patient over to another nurse. But
Right, right.
It, you're transferring the patient
Asleep.
asleep and
Sure.
hoping that you don't have any delays with the elevator, and knowing that you've got to.
Oh, there's a consideration
That's
all by
right.
itself.
So that was our 3 years in training, I think, served us well when we were doing things like that.
Was
Because-
there less paperwork for a nurse on the floor than there is today?
I would
Of
say
course,
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Much
You only
less.
you only had one chart. You had a chart, and you had your nurse's notes, and
Everything was in
everything
that
was in
one
that
chart.
one chart.
It was all there, huh?
We didn't have the number of, not a small percentage of the number of medications that they have now.
Oh, correct.
Oh,
You know, the
my.
cardiovascular medications. Just think of how few antibiotics we had. A couple, maybe, sulfa
Well,
and
penicillin
penicillin.
and sulfa.
And
And,
so-
they were dispensed from a medicine cabinet in the kitchen area, and you dispensed them. They were sent up, the pharmacy sent them in bottles, and you had to prepare each medication for each patient yourself, hopefully with the right one.
The right one? Oh, my goodness, yes. Guess what we found? Right here on this page. Guess what we found? I told you, she hasn't changed a bit. What year was this? The class of 1949.
49er.
Did we show your picture in the yearbook?
Oh, no.
Get it open. We're going to show it right now.
She's got a very
This,
good
huh?
Which one is she, right, left?
Oh, in here? Oh, she was the one. I forgot what page it was now. Oh, boy.
Just down.
Yeah, right here. She's the one on this side, as you're looking at it, the left side. Make sure we got the right person in there. If we're going to kid somebody over the photograph, we have to do it. All right, here we are. See that?
Very good pictures.
Right over here, next to my microphone.
Very young.
Well,
was.
when you and I were young, Maggie,
That's
Yeah.
right.
as the old song goes,
That's for sure.
that was a long time ago, and there was a little bit of water over the proverbial dam since those days. But you know what?
You see Marcy?
Yeah, we want to see your picture.
I,
the year you
I didn't
graduated.
have a year.
Oh, you didn't have a yearbook. She was such a bad girl. She
Yeah.
couldn't have a yearbook.
Right. So,
These old books are real treasures.
yes, they
What
are.
have you got in there that you'd like to show us?
Well, let's see. What do we have in here?
That's the class of
I
40,
don't,
class of September 49.
September 49, yeah.
Are you people in here?
Yes.
You want to look at it? Where are you? Can you see it from there? Because I want to show everybody. Right there. That would be, I think I can get my finger right over you. Face right here. You didn't know that existed, did you? Or did you?
I had really forgotten it until I saw it.
Do you?
You had one of them.
You know, you think that's funny. I found a bunch of old yearbooks from the Brushton High School. Our school was so small in Moira, we didn't have yearbooks. We blew all our money on New York City trips. But huh?
Got a year page.
Yeah, a year page. We couldn't even afford that. But I did show up in some of the Brushton yearbooks, and that's kind of neat. What do you got?
Well, that was our graduation at
Oh.
Gilt's Auditorium.
Oh, no kidding.
Right.
Which has been
We all had a
complete.
bouquet of
Which has been completely restored since that time. They've done a magnificent job on that building.
nice. It's a nice.
For those
auditorium.
people who don't know about the original Hawkins Hall, which wasn't called Hawkins Hall, tremendous fire in the 20s, and it raised like the phoenix from the ashes, and is a beautiful facility now. Still has great sound in that auditorium.
Yes, it's well known for
Who
that.
gave the main speech that year? Do you remember?
Well, there was Dr. Ryan was the one that gave us our awards.
That's what counted most. Never mind the speeches, right?
And I can't remember if we had a guest speaker, but Dr. Ganong, who was a general practitioner
my
in Saranac,
goodness.
he was
How could
there.
you not? And when you get a street called Back Street or Ganong Drive named after you,
Right.
you know you've done something right during your lifetime.
Right.
He was great.
Those
He was a
country
nice guy.
physicians,
Right. He was.
we could do a whole program about him
Yes.
all by himself.
Now, here
Okay.
I am.
Okay.
It's that
You
was
hold the microphone for 1 minute, and I'm going to point at you. Where are you? Right here.
right there.
Right above my finger.
And that was in children's ward or pediatrics.
Top of the ladder or where?
Right above that's not a ladder, that's the end of the bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, down there.
Yeah, down here, where this finger down here.
The little boy.
Yeah. Got it? What was the circumstances there?
We were taking care of, this is Franny Bean, and
Oh,
we were
my.
students. That was our uniform, the striped top.
Yes, yes.
And we were doing something with this little boy.
He looked
looks-
like his
he
was a little
looks-
tenuous, doesn't he,
He
huh?
does.
He
He
wasn't
look-
quite sure if he I didn't see a needle in one of your hands there, Mark.
No, we would have been hiding that.
Oh, my. Isn't that wonderful? What's this? Oh, that's that's-
Champlain Valley School of Nursing. That was the second school, Champlain Valley School of Nursing.
oh,
From
yes.
Champlain Valley
Joyce Heron, I think,
Hospital
is
School of
behind.
Nursing to Champlain Valley School of Nursing to CVPH School of Nursing.
Isn't it
Those-
amazing?
those
You've
are
seen
the
so
three.
many changes over the years.
Yeah, few, yes.
We're having so much fun talking with three gals who made nursing their career for such a long time, and we're going to wrap up our program with the best stories yet, I promise, in just a moment. We have a few more minutes, and you know, Marcy mentioned off-camera practical jokes and how they play jokes on you. What were you talking about?
Well, I know I remembered in one girl in our class, we were working on men's ward at that time, and one of the nurses asked this student to go down to the laboratory to get a fallopian tube. And
Oh, my.
and of course, she was very serious, and the student went down to the laboratory and asked for a fallopian tube. And of course, Sister, I don't think really appreciated that.
Can you understand that?
I can understand.
That was mild compared to some of the jokes that they might play today. That's kind of cute.
And I remember one day somebody brought some flowers in for a patient. And at that time, we had glass urinals. And so the student couldn't find a vase, so she went and washed out the urinal and brought it back and said, "Here, this looks nice. It's a nice shape." And so
Oh, isn't that
she
amazing?
brought that in for the person to put their flowers in.
So there's a little humor in the hospital now. It's not all staid.
Oh no,
Oh, no.
you have to have a little fun
You
in the
have to.
hospital.
High pressure, and you know that's part of what we talked about nurses. Somebody would say, "Why would nurses and doctors smoke? Why would people in the radio business smoke? 3.5 packs a day for me until 1975. The high pressure." Mm-hmm. Anyway, you want to show me something here? It's a bit difficult for people to see, but I want you to tell. I'm going to show this and tell me what it is.
This is a picture of one of our alumni, Frances Liberty, who was from the Albany area. I believe she was from Guilderland.
Yes.
And she served in 3 wars, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. And she was a lieutenant colonel when she retired. And she died in 2004. And in the painting that was done of her and another girl that served in this at the same time, it's pictured with her with a rosary in her hand that she had given to a soldier that was dying on the battlefield. And he was a Jewish soldier. And she gave him the rosary, and months later found out that he had survived. And so he brought the rosary back to her. And so the rosary is pictured in that painting.
Isn't that a great story?
That painting is hanging in the NISNA Center, the Nurses Center in Albany, or Guilderland, I believe it is.
That's a great story.
Oh, I hadn't heard
It
that
is a
one.
great
Yeah,
story.
I hadn't heard
You know
about
what?
that.
I got to tell all three of you that things like this are the biggest kick in the world for me, because this is living history.
Right.
Well,
You people have lived it. You didn't read about this in one of these books. You were there, as Edward R. Murrow used to
Let's
say.
say right.
Sister,
And if we were not on record, we probably could tell you a lot of other stories.
Oh, well, we could stay here for about a half an hour after that in the edited version of the program.
Sister Mary Daniels, who was in charge of the operating room, ran a tight ship there. And of course, that was in the days when they didn't have much money, and she was always very saving. She tried to save catgut, anything that wasn't used, and she tried to give it back to the doctors to, they would all be re-sterilized, of course, to use, but many of them objected. And I think Dr. de Grandpré was one of the main ones.
Well, Dr. Barton and Dr. Ryan used to do a lot of objecting, too.
Oh, yes.
Another thing, of course, we used to, the gloves used in surgery were washed and dried, and if there were any holes in them, they were patched and then
We
used,
talked about that before. I think that's the craziest.
used for floor gloves.
I love it.
And actually, I worked in the operating room after I graduated. I used to take a bunch of these gloves home with me and patch them while I was sitting in the
believe-
evening,
That's a story we're going to have to end with because our tape is running out, but I want to thank Marcy Cavanaugh, Suzanne Paris, and Agatha McDonald for being with us today. You folks are the best. This is one of the best shows ever. May you go on and on and on and on. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.